Okay, today we're going to talk about a new chapter, a new lesson in macroeconomics, namely aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Aggregate. So in this chapter, we're going to go through aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Remember that when businesses make decisions, usually they, of course, consider what will take place or what is taking place in the economy today and what will take place in the economy in the future. Therefore, the profitability of businesses, of course, will depend in part on many factors. Their profitability will depend on the prices of the labor inputs, namely the wages of the employees they have to pay. Of course, also it depends on the prices of non-labor inputs, you know. Also, they depends on, or their profitability also depends on the productivity of their employees, and also, the profitability of the businesses or firms depend also depends also on the taxes they have to pay the government. And so, a firm or a business must consider or take into consideration all these important things, okay, when it wants to, grow and make profits. Also, if businesses would like to or think about trading overseas, then they have to consider other factors. They have to consider the exchange rate, which is the price of the domestic currency in terms of the foreign currency. Also, they have to consider, the real foreign national income, the real foreign, national income. Okay, because these important things are, they have to be taken into consideration when, thinking to trade overseas. So all these concepts will be discussed as we progress in these chapters, of course. Now, when we think of an economy, of course, we think of two major activities. We think of the buying activity and the producing activity. Okay, so an economy, of course, is considered to be having two activities: the buying activity and the producing activity. And economists, when they're speaking about the aggregate demand, they basically are speaking about the buying activity. And when they are speaking about the aggregate supply, they are speaking about the producing activity. So let us put this, draw this flow chart to show the two activities of an economy. So we can say, as we said, an economy consists of two major activities. We can look at an economy from two sides: buying activity and producing activity. Let's, draw a flow chart to show these two activities. So this is what you get here. An economy as we said, we have two activities. We have buying activity the purchasing of goods and services, and we have also producing activity. A firm or a business, of course, is is established in order to do what? In order to produce goods and services. Okay, so when economists speak about the aggregate demand, they are basically speaking about what? About the buying activity. So when we say buying activity, we means what? We means the aggregate demand. So aggregate demand is the buying activity in the economy. So what we're gonna say represent aggregate demand with this simple aggregate demand. And when we're talking about production side or producing activity, we're talking about of course, the aggregate supply. Aggregate supply. Okay, we're gonna represent aggregate supply by AS. However, we know that we have two time periods. We have the short run time period and we have the long run time period. Of course, the short run is the time period in which at least one input is fixed. So here, the aggregate supply that is related to the short run, we're gonna call it the short run aggregate supply. So we have here short run aggregate supply. Short run aggregate supply. Okay, short run aggregate supply. And then the one that is related to the long run, we're going to call it long run aggregate supply. Long run aggregate supply. Long run aggregate supply. We're gonna, it's gonna be stands for. We're gonna represent or the shortcut for it, long run aggregate LRS, which stands for long run aggregate supply. Okay. Therefore, these are the activities of the economy. Of course, our focus, as we said, aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So let's start with aggregate demand, of course. What actually do you mean by aggregate demand? Aggregate demand. Aggregate of course, when we say aggregate, we mean total. The total demands by the players of the economy, namely the consumers, the producers, and the government. So aggregate means what? Aggregate means total or sum. Okay? So aggregate demand is the quantity demanded of domestic goods and services. Of domestic goods and services, of course, both by the consumers, the producers, and the government. Or the quantity demanded of domestic real GDP at different price levels. It is quantity demanded of domestic real GDP at different price levels, ceteris paribus. This is the aggregate demand. Of course, we can, have a table to represent the aggregate demand. You can say aggregate demand, as you can see, and we have a table over here. You can say here, price level. You can have the quantity demanded of real GDP. Let's start with 150, 120, and 100. When the price level was 150, then the quantity demand of real GDP, let's say 100 million or 100 billion, 100, let's say billion dollars worth of goods and services. What about when the price level, goes down to 120? Of course, we're going to expect the quantity demand of GDP to increase. Let's say to 120 or 130 billion dollars worth of goods and services, or $120 billion worth of real GDP. What about when the price level goes down to 100? Then, of course, we expect the quantity demand of real GDP to increase. Let's say here to 150 billion dollars worth of real GDP. So as you can see, we have an inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demanded of goods and services or real GDP. So there is an inverse relationship between them. And this inverse relationship gives us a downward sloping aggregate demand curve, as you can see, in a minute. Of course, the aggregate demand curve is the graphical representation of the aggregate demand. So the aggregate demand curve is the graphical representation of the aggregate demand. So we can graph the aggregate demand curve. Remember, from the previous graph, of course, this is, graphically, we can say this one here. We can put the price level here. Okay, and we can have here quantity demanded of real GDP. Remember, we have 150, we have 120, we have 100. When the price was 150, remember that the aggregate demand, the quantity demand of real GDP was 100. Okay. This one here. When the price level went down to 120, of course, the quantity demand of real GDP increased to 130. That's 130 here. And then when the price level went down to 100, we come up with 150. 150 is over here. So when we connect all these, we come up with we come up with, of course, a downward sloping aggregate demand curve. Aggregate demand curve. So now we have an inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demand of electricity. As the price level decreases from 150 to 120 to 100, then the quantity demand increases from 100 to 130 to 150. So we have an inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demand of electricity, and that gives us a downward sloping demand curve. Now, the question that usually economists ask, why is aggregate demand downward sloping? Question. Why is aggregate demand downward sloping? In other words, why does the aggregate demand slope downward? Of course, economists, talks about some explanations for this inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demand of electricity. Economists talk about, rate balance effects. They talk about interest rate effect. They talk about the international rate effect. So there are three kinds of explanation. There are three kinds of explanation for the inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demanded of real GDP. The first effect is, is the real balance effect. Okay, we're talking about real balance effect. To interest rate effect. 3, international trade effect. Let's talk about the real balance effect. Okay, so let's see what does the real balance effect say about or explain about the downward sloping demand aggregate demand curve. Okay, here we say kind of effect real balance effect due to a change in the price level. This question here, how it works, how it works. In other words, how this real balance effect works. And here we say the graphical representation of the effect. Okay? Great. Now, the inverse, the real balance effect states that the inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demand is established through changes in the value of monetary wealth, the wealth of the consumer. Okay? Now, and changes in the monetary wealth, is established, changes in monetary wealth can be looked at through either increase or decreased, and an increased or decreased, purchasing power. How is that? Okay, let me give an example. Say that a consumer, let's say a consumer has a wealth of $1,000. A person has a wealth of $1,000. And that the price level goes down. Okay? The price level goes down. Now, what happens to the purchasing power of the $1,000? Of course, it will increase. For instance, the $1,000 that once used to purchase 10 microwave at a price of $100 each, now when the price level decreased to $50 per microwave, he is able to purchase 20 microwave sets. So therefore, price level decreases. That implies the purchasing power increased. Purchasing power increased. So the $1,000 now that once bought 10 microwave sets when the price of each microwave is $100, now when the price level decreased to $50 per microwave, now the consumer is able to purchase how much? How many? He is going to purchase 20 microwave sets. So now, when the price level decreased, the purchasing power increased. That implies here monetary wealth increased. Monetary wealth what? Increased. So what that means? It means the consumer becomes what? Wealthier. The consumer is now wealthier. Okay? Which implies what? That gives him incentives to purchase more, which implies buy more. So what do we conclude here? When the price level decrease, buy more, which implies we have an inverse relationship, that, takes good. Graphical representation, this is what you see here. It is the aggregate demand is downward sloping. So this is the aggregate demand. This is the price level. And this is quantity demanded here. So what happens here? When the price level is here, okay, P1, or P0, that means he purchased this much. Now when went down to P1, now he purchased that much. U0, U1. So that implies, he purchased more. When the price level, so we have what? We have a downward sloping or a movement along the demand curve. There's no change in the aggregate demand, however, there's a change along the aggregate demand curve. So the same thing we consider, of course, when the price level increase, that implies the purchasing power decrease, which implies the monetary worth will decrease. That implies he becomes less wealthy. Which applies buy less. So graphically, as you can see, price level, quantity demand for GDP, and this is what you get here, aggregate demand. Now, price level increased. We are here, P0, that's what you get, Q0. Now, when the price level goes to P1, now what happens? He is going to, of course, purchase Q1, so it decreases. So it implies here, we are moving up, okay? This is how we show the aggregate demand curve. This is moving up along the aggregate demand curve. Here, moving down along the aggregate demand curve, okay? This is the real price effect, and this is how it works, the real price effect. Okay, now the second effect that is, put by economists to explain, the inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity of GDP. That is to explain the, the downward sloping of the aggregate demand is the interest rate effect. So second one is the interest rate effect. Let me just say one thing here, that the interest rate effect states that the inverse relationship between the price level and the quantity demanded of GDP, is established through changes in that part of consumer and producer spending that is sensitive to changes in the interest rate. Okay, great. Now, usually a person or a consumer buys a fixed, has or usually buys a fixed amount of goods and services each week. That fixed bundle of goods and services or a fixed basket of goods and services each week, usually a consumer, tends to purchase that basket each week. Okay, great. Now, when the price level decreases, okay, then that implies the purchasing power of consumers' money will increase. Now, when his money has increased in value because of the decrease in the price level, that means he is able to purchase his basket of goods and services, his fixed basket of goods and services with less money. For instance, suppose that person spends $200 each week, on a fixed basket of goods and services, such as food, beverages, clothing, gasoline, and so on and so forth. So now, when the price level has decreased, then the consumer is able to purchase that fixed basket of goods and services with less money, let's say with $100. So the question now is that what does he do with the extra money that is left? Because he used to spend $200 on that basket, fixed basket of goods and services. Now, with the decrease in the price level, now he is spending, if he wants to continue to purchase that basket, now he can spend $100. So he now an extra $100. Okay, so what does he do with the extra $100, in his money? of course, he has to save that money. So in terms of simple demand and supply analysis, you notice that the supply of loanable funds will increase, causing the price of a credit, that is the interest rate, to go down. And then when the interest rate goes down, that means consumers are able to get more loans. Okay? So with more loans, consumers can purchase more goods and services. Therefore, when the price level goes down, the end result is that more goods and services are bought. Okay? So let me state the things that I have already talked about. So now we can state the interest rate. So now we're talking about the second effect is the interest rate effect. Of course, let's state here effect, kind of effect how it works. And we can call graphical representation of the effect. Kind of effect is interest rate effect due to a change in the price level. Okay? Now, price level decreases, as I stated already. Of course, the consumer has a fixed bundle of goods and services that he has to purchase each week. So now, the first case I'm going to discuss now is that when the price level decreases, that implies, of course, his purchasing power that is the purchasing power of his money will increase, which implies is able to purchase, the bundle with less money. The consumer is able to purchase the fixed bundle of goods and services with less money. So now what you get? You get extra amount of money left. Okay, that implies end up with extra money. Okay, as I gave the example, he used to purchase the bundle with $200. Now, when the price level goes down, he is able to purchase that bundle with $100. So you have an extra $100 left. So what does that consumer do with the extra money? Of course, he has to save it. So end up with extra money. That implies save that money. So with simple demand and supply analysis, you notice that when he saved the money, that means the supply of loanable funds will increase. This implies supply of loanable funds increases, which implies the price of a credit, which is the interest rate, will go down. Interest rate goes down. So when interest rate goes down, it means what? Means that will motivate or encourage consumers as well as producers and others to get more loans. So that means get more loans. And when getting more loans, it means purchasing more. It means buy more goods and services. Buy more goods and services. So we could portray this one graphically, as you can see over here. This is the price level. This is the quantity demanded of each GDP. Okay, and this is the demand curve, the aggregate demand curve, that is downward sloping. Now, of course, the price level goes down. We used to be here, okay, P0, and the quantity demand is this, Q0. Now, when the price level goes down, what happens? Buy more goods. That means the quantity demand increases. So it goes down to here, to P1. So what happens to quantity demanded? Goes down to Q1. So that implies went from A to B. Okay, so we have a movement along the aggregate demand, curve. Okay, so when the price decreases from P0 to P1, the price level, of course, the quantity demanded, of course, increases from Q0 to Q1, which that stays the first one. This is the first case. What about the second case? The second case, when the price level increases, that implies purchasing power of the consumers want goes down. That implies, now when it goes down, of course, that consumer cannot, if he would like to purchase the same bundle of goods and services, he cannot purchase that bundle with the same amount of money. It means he needs more money. So that implies he needs more money to continue to purchase the same basket. So what implies here? That implies he has to go to a bank in order to get a loan. Get a loan. That implies demand for loanable funds increases, which implies interest rate increases, which implies less loans he can get. Means less loans. Borrow, which implies less amount of goods and services he buys. So the second one, as you can see, this is the price, this is the quantity, this is demand, aggregate demand. So now what happens? The price level was here, P0. He used to demand this much. Okay, Q0. Now when the price level increases to P1, what happens? The current demand will goes down to here. So I get A, B, and as you can see Q1. So as you can see, this is what we see that when this price level goes down, it goes up, that's what you get, a movement up along the aggregate demand curve, which implies less quantity of goods and services is demanded.